With dazzling turquoise waters, unreal white sands and reefs teeming with marine life, the Maldives could quite easily be described as a holiday maker's paradise. But a new documentary by the Qatari broadcaster Al Jazeera this month shows how individuals at the very top are reaping the benefits from the heavenly rewards. Al Jazeera's investigative unit has exposed massive corruption by the Maldives government, led by President Abdullah Yameen, including theft, bribery and money laundering. The story is told through data obtained from 3 of former Vice President Ahmed smartphones and dozens of confidential documents. It also features secretly recorded confessions of 3 men on the run who embezzled millions and delivered the stolen cash on the orders of the president and his deputy. The program alleges how the pair sold the nation's islands and knocked down prices to international companies and illegally withdrew millions for themselves. Confessions show how stolen money were used to buy influence, bribe MPs, judges and other top officials. Several media organizations were also attacked, allegedly on the orders of the vice president, and reveals how one journalist's disappearance may have been linked to the government. Another massive revelation shows how the president's ministers and aides plotted to launder up to $1.5 billion through the South Asian nation's central bank with the help of secretive businessmen from Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia. The former Auditor General investigating the Vice President's corruption was also nearly targeted, along with his staff at the government offices. Last but not least was how adversaries of the President, such as the former Premier Mohammed Nasheed, were targeted with the prison sentences personally decided by the President. In short, it alleges how the President, the police, the central bank, Parliament and the judiciary conspired in wide-scale state corruption. The Maldives government has responded to the allegations. In a statement they said,
"The government of the Maldives is disappointed by the allegations that have been made. Particular concern is raised with regard to the manner in which the reporting was undertaken. In preparing the report, the government notes that the individuals interviewed are persons who are suspects in a corruption investigation. It is also noted that individuals who are actively working against the government, some of whom having publicly announced that they seek the removal of the legitimate government before the end of its constitutional term, have also been interviewed for this report. Further, the fact that the government was denied the opportunity to present a balanced, fair and true version of events makes stealing paradise nothing but defamatory and falls short of accepted international and legal norms of reporting."
According to Al Jazeera, the government failed to provide a detailed response despite a request early last month. The Maldives Central Bank also denied the laundering of $1.5 billion, saying Al Jazeera was spreading baseless allegations which can damage public trust in the country's financial sector. Following the broadcast of the documentary, the offices of the Maldives Independent, whose editor featured in the documentary, was raided. The police carried out a warrant to search the premises on suspicion that the newspaper and its employees had participated in an alleged conspiracy to overthrow the elected government. Police also raided the office of a local human rights organization located in the same building. The Maldives United Opposition, which is a broad coalition of opposition parties and President Yameen's former allies, led by Mohammed Nasheed and ex-Vice President Dr. Mohammed Jamil Ahmed, has renewed calls for the President's arrest on charges of corruption and abuse of power. News of the upcoming documentary last month sparked a frenzy of anticipation in the Maldives, with people of all persuasions wading into the controversy. Many will be hoping the frenzy carries on and the allegations that were presented be taken seriously. Afzal Ahmed, Asia Wired. Joining me to look at the aftermath, we're pleased to have Will Jordan, investigative producer at Al Jazeera's investigative unit, who was a reporter of that documentary. Thank you, Will, for joining us. So since the broadcast, what has been the reaction and the aftermath?
The reaction to the film has been very positive outside the Maldives. In the Maldives, it's been mixed because obviously the government supporters are not supportive of the film. On the day that we released it, hours actually after we did, police raided the Maldives Independent, which was a newspaper whose editor, Zahina Rashid, was interviewed for the film. They in fact raided the entire building that the Maldives Independent is, and that included an NGO and a lawyer's office. They obviously have issued statements criticising the film, but the reaction has been very positive. The views have been good, and So far, I'm pleased with the reaction.
And are the contributors in exile from the country, or they're away from the country at the moment?
We, for their own safety, we took some of the contributors out of the country. At the moment, off the top of my head, I don't think there's a single one of the contributors to the film is actually in the Maldives, which tells you a lot about the political situation there, actually. Most of those who are either opposition-linked or indeed attempting to be independent in a place where it's very hard to be so, all of them are coming under an awful lot of criticism and threats, and most have had to leave the country, and either in Colombo or London.
So, of course, one of the main, in terms of criticisms now of the documentary, the government has come out with a statement. Of course, the key sort of accusation against yourself is that, you know, this documentary is almost advancing the opposition's agenda, almost branding you as an opposition activist. How do you respond to those assertions?
I'm an investigative producer. I work for an investigative unit. It's my job not to report the news, but to make the news, to find out new information. We obtained the data from 3 of the vice presidents' iPhones, secretly filmed interviews in which 3 of his employees talked about delivering large bags of cash, up to $1 million at a time, to the president. That is new information. What that information does, other than being news, whether it serves an agenda of the opposition or the government, that is not for me to decide. I simply gather the information, find a scoop, that's investigative journalism, and put it out there. What happens after that, I don't know. I'm just looking for a good story.
But they might say that in terms of looking at the contributors, majority were opposition aligned, and the government is also saying that you didn't give them the opportunity to present their side. Is that the case?
The film came out on September the 7th. We wrote to them on August the 9th. When the invite came out for a screening of the film, we again wrote to them. So that was August the 22nd, I believe. And both times we requested comment from them. We would have happily done an interview with the president. We offered him the opportunity to do an interview on the day that we released the film. I would have been delighted to have been able to put those allegations directly to the president or his ministers. Unfortunately, those interviews weren't forthcoming. And so we spoke to independent journalists, commentators, and the opposition, the united opposition now, who are all in exile, either in Colombo or London.
And even if you did ask them for comment, they are one of the spokespeople for the president. He was saying that President Yamin is not directly linked, to those allegations. How do you respond to that assertion?
Well, he is directly linked to the allegations. The three sources, the 3 young men who worked for Vice President Ahmed describe in very, very great detail how they carried bags of cash in black travel bags to the president late at night. 1 o'clock is the one story where he takes $100,000 to the president's residence. The president receives it and says, no, my friend, I want $1 million. To say that there's not a link to the president is farcical. Now, if you want to talk about the theft of island lease money, the leasing of tropical islands, then that was primarily done by the Vice President Ahmed. However, that entire system is created by an economic and social council in the Maldives, which is headed by Ahmed and the president, and they are kept abreast of all the goings-on at the MMPRC. So the possibility that the president wasn't aware what one of his closest ministers, his deputy, was doing when he was getting regular briefings about an agency that was being looted of nearly all the income it was having is, frankly, very hard to believe.
And in terms of the media climate in the country, of course, we've seen the reaction since the broadcast. What sort of challenges and obstacles do journalists face? Of course, you was a former editor of the Maldives Independent, formerly known as Minivan News. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago when I was there was no real media freedom, but at least there was the optimism that it was a time of reform and change, and the 30 years of Gayoom's regime was coming to an end. And with that was coming a roadmap of reform, which included the pluralisation of the media, more outlets, not just state media, the liberalisation of the media, and a free and fair press. Now, we were getting there slowly, and the media was becoming far more independent. There were far fewer state newspapers. All of the journalists in the Maldives benefited in that environment. Since President Yamin has come to power, he has targeted many of those media organisations, either through the courts or simply through intimidation, or, as they say in the film, by controlling the sponsors. So if you find the source of the money. And so we've seen huge numbers of outlets closing. CNN, which was quite a hard-hitting investigative place. Jazeera, which was one of the biggest and, in fact, the oldest newspaper, that has now closed and been reborn as Miharu, which is facing trouble. The Maldives Independent constantly faces trouble. They have their windows smashed. There was a machete buried in the door. One of the reporters has been missing for 2 years now. So the press freedom environment there is terrible. I mean, there is great hostility to the free press, and it comes from the government and its agencies.
And of course, you've received a death threat prior to the broadcast. Still on Twitter, has this been dealt with robustly?
I mean, we've reported it to the relevant authorities in this country. That's the Metropolitan Police, and they're looking into it. But, this is par for the course for the journalists of the Maldives who receive regular death threats, countless death threats, and face violence. Ahmed, who's featured in the film, he's been missing for more than 2 years. One has to presume he's dead. There are eyewitnesses saying he was abducted by men with a knife and a car. That's the kind of situation that those people are doing journalism in, day out. And it's very brave and it's very inspirational.
And just going on a previous one, actually, it just came to my mind. One of the campaigners, justice campaigners, Aisha Velazini, she said that, it's not just President Yamin who should be, put on spot for corruption and mishandling. Also, the previous president, Mohammed Nasheed. What do you think about this?
Well, Velazini's point, which she passionately campaigns on, is very interesting, which is that the key to the democratic reform in the Maldives, as in many countries, is the judiciary. And it has not been done correctly in the Maldives. She blames both Nasheed, who took over the reins from Gayoom and who was supposed to lead that process, and both Gayoom and Yamin for it. It's very clear that the system has failed, that the judiciary is not free. And so what she is asking for is for both Nasheed and Yamin and whoever happens to be in power to completely dissolve the judiciary and build it back up again under international guidance. And I think that's a very important point, that if you want, and it's true for the whole of South Asia, and in fact for all those countries that are seeking to democratize, is that you have to have an independent judiciary where judges are totally independent and can be relied upon, and their judgments can be relied upon, and that they're not influenced by politicians. That didn't happen in the Maldives, and we've seen the consequences.
And last question. Now, of course, the documentary has aired. What would you like to see, or would you like to see other bodies pursuing the allegations that you brought forward?
I think given the richness of the data that we had from the Vice President's iPhones and the source information from those videos, there are a huge number of leads to go on, not to mention the money laundering in Malaysia and Singapore, Indonesia, the individuals involved in that. Obviously, as an investigative journalist, you'd like to see an impact to your work. I would hope that the relevant authorities would investigate. Certainly, new sources have been coming to me since the film has been released with new allegations about the individuals involved. So it's clear there's an awful lot to be investigated. Transparency International has asked for an investigation, and I would hope that if it is indeed found that there are people who have been committing crimes such as bribery, embezzlement and money laundering, that they should be brought to book.
Right, thank you, Jordan, of Al Jazeera's Investigative Unit, for joining us. It's a pleasure.